Hi, I'm Kathryn.
I'm Theresa.
And we are the co-authors of the book, Pass the Baton, Empowering All Music Students.
Our goal is to share stories of educators who are passing the baton and empowering their music students. We want to help teachers create music lessons that transform students from passive consumers to vibrant creatives.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being with us today. We have the pleasure of talking to Levi Allison. And I guess to backstory here, Levi, I was kind of roaming social media and came across one of your blog posts, and it just kind of stopped me. And I was nodding my head over and over and just thought, gosh, I really related to the stories and the things you were saying in your blog posts. So thank you, first of all, for writing your blog posts or your blog, and for sharing the things that happen in your classroom. So, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So if you could just maybe start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your teaching position.
Absolutely. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. When you write these blog posts, you never know where they're going to go. You don't know what they're going to impact with people. You don't know if it's going to resonate. And so it's really great to see that people who are other music educators are finding truth and joy in them. So thank you so much for sharing. I'm so happy to be here. I have been a massive fan of both of yours. I absolutely love your book. I think it's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for giving music teachers who are trying to empower students through a more unconventional means, I always like to say. So thank you so much. So a little bit about myself. I am a music teacher here in South Korea. I work at Chadwick International. I teach grade 1, 2, and 3 music. I've worked in Kuwait. I've worked in China, and now I'm here in South Korea. I primarily do general music, but I've also done a little bit of band. I've done a little bit of orchestra and honor choir as well.
Nice.
Oh, that's awesome. Again, thank you so much for being here. So one of the things that we've read that you talk about is using centers in your classroom to promote student choice and ownership. Why centers, and how does it work? What does it look like?
Well, I always like to use the words organized chaos because it truly is, because we'll always have about 7 to 10 centers. And when there's only 24 to 30 kids, that's not very many kids at a center. So a lot is happening. So the reason why I chose centers was because I had an amazing early years practitioner, Yasmin, and I was just in awe with the level of engagement her students were doing, but it was because of through centers, and it was through purposeful centers. It wasn't just random pieces of paper or instructions just going around. It was purposeful centers that were tied to standards or tied to questions that students had. And so when I saw this, I was like, how can I do this with music? And she's like, well, let's just try one. Just try 1 or 2 and just see how it goes. It was beautiful. I knew immediately that this is what was going to happen. And so over the years, I've developed, my toolbox of things that I'm able to do. And so now I try to offer, pre-COVID, with social distancing and then hand sanitizing and making sure kids are using their own materials. We make sure to provide a lot of different options for kids so they can explore music in a way that makes sense for them. So why centers is because I'm trying to make sure that every kid gets a way to connect to music in a way that works for them, whether it's through dribbling a soccer ball or a base sports analogies. I'm not very good at it, whether it's dribbling basketball to the steady beat, or whether it's kicking a hacky sack to a steady beat, or whether it's playing violin and playing the harmony against the melody and then looking and listening for intonation. So I'm really trying to make sure that they're getting their passions involved into the centers I'm playing. So we really try to co-create the centers together, especially for the upper grades when the routines have been there so far.
Wow. So you just mentioned a hacky sack, a violin, and we'll say sports balls.
Yeah.
What does this look like? I can't.
Again, organized chaos.
I love it. Can you describe some examples?
Absolutely. I had a student a lovely young boy in Kuwait, and he was a massive soccer player. And he was in 5th grade, and he was repeatedly told, "You're not good at music. You're not good at music. You can't sing. You can't sing." We've all heard the story of kids being told they can't sing. And so because music is such a personal aspect of someone's identity, he just couldn't do it. He didn't ever want to try. He's like, "I'm not good at it. I'm never going to be good at it. Why should I bother?" And I said, "Because you're human, and music is a way to be human. It's a human identity. It's how we relate to others. It's how we connect to people. It's how we connect to ourselves. It's how we develop well-being." And so I said, "What can we do? What can I do? You name it, and I'll make it happen." And he said, "I love soccer." And I said, "Great. What can we do with soccer?" And he showed me a little bit of what he did with soccer. And he was an amazing dribbler with the soccer ball with his feet. And immediately I saw a rhythmic pentameter, and I was like, "You can do steady beat." He's like, "No, I can't." I was like, "Yes, you can." And so I videoed him, and I showed him the video, and I was like, and I sang our steady beat song. He's like, "Oh," and it was like a light bulb went off. And I was like, "You will do everything through a soccer ball, everything." He did melodies through a soccer ball. He showed highs and lows with how high he kicked it, how low he kicked it. He showed melodies on a staff with the soccer ball on the floor, moving it back and forth. And for him, I have to say, it doesn't work for everybody, but for him, it was his gateway into experiencing music and making it connect with him. And it was just one of the most beautiful moments. And that's when I realized that student passions must come first, and we must be flexible in how we approach things to allow for all students to get excited about music.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
I think we sometimes feel like so overwhelmed by, how do we do that for each of our kids? But what I heard you say is you just asked and listened, and it takes, of course, a lot of time, but once you kind of know the way in, you with your creative thinking, it's like, you have come all of a sudden, it's like there's all these ways in front of you of how to engage with that kid. Absolutely. And that's really awesome.
And the other thing that we talk about, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. I always say I'm a facilitator of learning. I'm not the end-all bearer of knowledge. I want to empower students with their own passions and their own curiosities. And how do we do that? Is by knowing our standards and knowing our concepts and focuses really, really well. And then looking for ways we can tie in everything together. And, we'll have upwards to 10 to 15 different projects happening at once. One kid's creating music melodies on GarageBand. One student is working with materials over there with xylophones. One's brought their violin and they're playing duets with the cellos, creating their own music. And it's just, when I say centers, I try really hard to, yes, we start off with pre-made centers that I choose, but once we get into grade 3, 4, and 5, when they get into those routines of what it means, those centers are definitely being built by them.
Yeah. So the two things that I love that you're talking about, one is just the relationship with the students. You've built the relationship so that student trusted that he could say to you, "Soccer's my thing." And you could have that conversation. And then for the other students to be able to see that happen, I think is also really powerful, because kids know, they're aware of what's going on around them. They're aware
of course.
And suddenly you had this child who hated music, didn't like, or whatever it was. And now is engaged and excited. And I think that's so important. But then I also love how you're talking about scaffolding, right?
Yes.
It's not like you're just throwing them into the deep end and saying, "Here we go." It's building up gradually, right? So you said you started with centers that you created.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And so I always go back, and I can pinpoint this exact conversation of when I found that centers was my thing. And student passions was Yasmin again. I walked into her KG1 classroom in Kuwait, and I just saw engagement for every child. And we know 5-year-olds engagement, that's tough. And when you can have 26 of them super engaged, I was like, this is either magic or this is really brilliant stuff. Like, how? And I'm going to learn. And she did She did. I will never forget it. She stayed with me after school and was like, let's build a center on them writing. Let's build a center on them creating differently. So like here, they're going to write paper and pencil. Here, they're going to write with clay. Here, they're going to write with paint. And it's all music. It was all music. It was them writing Sol Mi patterns. And here we're going to have bingo chips with 2 lines and see what they come up with. And then this other center, you're going to have the same stuff, but you're going to put a xylophone out with 2 bars, take all the bars off, put 2 Sol Mi bars, G and E, and let's see if they can play the pattern. And right there, and she was just a wealth of knowledge. I was like, oh my goodness, this is brilliant. And I've never been more excited. So it's definitely something that has stuck with me for the last 9 years.
Yeah. And it sounds like it started, the centers coming from you, because to me, I heard like you gave them the vocabulary or the medias, whatever that is, right? Like of the paper, of the instrument, of the DAW, right? So that then they have all these choices now, and have a little bit of schema and confidence of like, I know that I did, I created something on a GarageBand. So I know if I liked that, I could go back to that. I have some schema, right? It wasn't just like, we're going to start them and then you let them go because there is no, foundation yet. But
yes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I always relate what you're talking about to, I don't know, a huge fan of Trevor McKenzie, Inquiry Mindset. Absolutely love everything he's written. And he has this beautiful graph that I have printed in every year, every school, and I have presented on it because it's just brilliant. It's about you talk about throwing kids into the deep end. He has this graph of what the 4 different types of inquiry and how deep it is in the pool. Mm-hmm. And I look at that of like, you can go through that entire journey within a lesson. Mm-hmm. You could go through, we're going to inquire into this one thing with these materials. And I look at that as the early years, like different ways. And then once you get into the deeper end, when they have the skills, when they have the executive functioning skills to be able to self-manage, to research, to think, using like PYP, ATLs, then they can really take those ideas and passions and go off on it. Mm-hmm. But we've got to start with building those learning blocks together. And how we do that is something I definitely take great pride in.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite graphics as well. We'll have to make sure we link to that, just because every little nuance in it, everything from what the students have, like whether they have a kickboard in their hand and where the teacher is, at the beginning, the teacher's in the pool with them, right? But then when it gets into that deep end, the teacher is standing on the side.
Yes. And isn't that what our goal is, for us to be, again, a facilitator of, almost of an instructional coach type of thing. Like, what are you excited about? How can I help support you? And everyone's like, but how do you do all the standards and how do you teach this? I was like, oh, that takes a lot of organization skills. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of sticky notes and there's a lot of talking and conferring and a lot of like seesaw feed forward feedback. But you know what? It is way better than a timed 60-second little quiz on notes.
Yeah.
So I will do it every day.
That's awesome.
So I think could we talk more about so you said when the kids get older and they're they've gone through your centers and they've experienced that kind of process, then you said something like you start to build centers with them plan with them. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So my inquiry project for the last 2 years has had how to build authentic assessments for 300 students. I don't teach the most students in a music teacher's world, but I do teach a lot, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And so how do I build authentic assessments? Well, that first means meaningful to them. They need to connect to what it is they're meaning, and they need to connect to the levels of understanding. So how do we do the levels of understanding, whether they're beginning, developing, and proficient? We build what that means for them. And so instead of me giving that rubric or continuum, whatever you want to call it, giving that to them, I say, what does a beginning of understanding for rhythm mean to you? What does it look like? What does it feel like? We do that for all students. And Seesaw has been an amazing way for documentation. So we don't have hundreds of papers of going around, but it has been a really amazing way. So once we've got that done, I was like, so with this in mind, because obviously proficient is our goal. It is not the end all be all goal, but it is what we're trying to go for. How can we do that? Then I open it to how because of COVID, usually I would do it in a brainstorming chalk talk. Everyone's around paper, but now because of COVID, we use Padlet, big fan of Padlet, and they all put in, how can they show rhythm? And I showed them the different modes of learning: singing, playing, drama, acting, writing, listening. And so then they just brainstorm dozens and dozens and dozens of ways of creating music and or responding to music. And I was like, wonderful. So then I take those, synthesize them all out, connect them all. And then together we say, so for this center listening, what is our goal? What is our goal? Our goal is to identify different rhythms in different sections of music. And so then once they've got that, and they get to choose wherever they want to go, but they all have a goal. They all have an understanding of where they want to go and their trajectory. And because of that, they're just so much more engaged, and they've identified their why, they identified their how. And now because of those two really critical pieces, now we can talk about what are you going to do to reach that? Instead of starting with what do you want to do? I really started trying this year. And again, learning journey for us all, because I did not always do it this way, but learning journey for us all was start really with your why. And like, why are you wanting to do listening? Why are you wanting to do that? Why is rhythm something you want to improve on? And then because of that, they're able to build these really wonderful engagements that they can explore a question that they have. Why is tika tika harder than ta? Why is 3-4 harder to count than 4-4? And so then they can, with those questions, then they can explore the different ways. And then we reflect on it. Every day we reflect on how their journey is going so far.
I'm guessing you're a Simon Sinek fan as well.
Yes, I do love Simon Sinek. Big fan.
Starts with why.
Well, and again, how simple is that? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like, how simple is it? Why are we doing what we are doing?
Right.
Because we do better. We do the best we can with what we know. But I don't remember ever going with, why are we learning X, Y, and Z? Why am I learning this? How is this going to tie to a global problem? How is this going to tie to real life application? And I tell all my students multiple times, I am not here for you to be Mozart. I am not here to make you Beethoven. If that's what you want to do, sure, we'll work on it. But I'm here to make you better people. And through that is going to be music. Yeah. I want you to be able to sing tunefully. I want you to be able to listen to music and identify where is the beat. I want you to be artful. I want you to think about, when we think of Fire Robin, I'm a huge fan of Fire Robin as well. And the fact that he has 3 main things: beatful, artful, and tuneful. I think that's wonderful, because nowhere does that say, I'm going to play the hardest piece of music. I'm going to do the hardest piece. And because we're so product-based, because it is music, we get all this, I'm not good at music, I'm not good at this, I'm not good at this, because our students have lost the sight of where is the process in that.
There's got to be some challenges to it as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Could you share a little bit about some challenges and maybe how you've worked through that?
Absolutely. First challenge right off the bat is, a lot of our students don't come in with the self-management skills needed to organize themselves across 12 or 10 centers. So helping them with that, providing checklists, providing checkpoints. I'm going to meet you every 5 minutes at a different center just to see how you're doing. And building, again, those self-management skills of, it is organized chaos. And I keep saying it because some of the kids do not do well with that, rightfully so. So how are we going to support something that is going to be beneficial to them, but in a way that's also not going to deter them from even trying? And another thing is, for our students, it is really hard for them to try. It is really hard for them to put themselves out there in such an open but structured way. And I always have a saying, is Mr. Levi expecting you to be perfect? And everyone's like, no. And I was like, what does Mr. Levi expect you to do? Try what? our best. And so again, because I just want them to try, because once they've tried, then we can start critiquing. Oh, did you think about this? How could this look like this? Using a little bit of like these questioning techniques to get them to dive deeper into their own personal questions. And so, yes, one of the challenges by far is supporting students who are struggling with just that self-management, because it is 45 minutes of unstructured, quote unquote, it's not teacher led, but planning. And so how we do that is I'll have a chart paper with all of the stations on it, centers on them. And, Andy Vassley's red light checkpoints, where, how did you feel about this? Red, green, or yellow? Green, okay, you don't need to visit. Red, it's impossible for right now. Let's review it. So that means I'm conferring with those students. I'm checking in with those students of what is it that we're confused about? Oh, is it this? Let's look at that. And so again, another challenge, documentation, 100%. 100%. And that is where my biggest challenge is, because there are so many students. Mm-hmm. And before I had access to Seesaw, luckily where I'm at a school where Seesaw is the primary learning platform that we use. But before, I had hundreds and hundreds of pieces of paper. The amount, I felt always so bad about the trees, because I did really see just reams of paper leaving my classroom. So luckily Seesaw, again, I'm so happy to work with Seesaw, because I don't know how I would do it otherwise. I really don't. Because it automatically documents, it automatically looks for trends. I'm automatically able to spot gaps or misunderstandings. I like to say misunderstandings rather than gaps, misunderstandings of learning, because with this unstructured play, it really does allow for misunderstandings to really shine. Mm-hmm. And it allows us to really check in with them. Oh, I understand where you're coming from. Thank you for sharing that idea. This is actually what form is. The amount of times I have to explain that form is not how many parts are in a piece of music, but actually the structure of a piece of music, because they saw, and that was my fault. I'll own it. I circled the parts thinking, okay, this is the part of a piece of music, but I only circled how many parts there were. Now I'm spending a whole month talking about it. So yeah, no, those are definitely the challenges I've overcome, facing. I don't know if I've overcome them yet.
Working towards. There you go. Yeah. But that's so true that, you learn so much from what they say and their feedback, right? And it's very evident that you are reading their reflections and that you're staying on top of that so that you can go back and fill in the gaps or, any of those misunderstandings. And that's important. Yeah. Sometimes we ask students anything. We ask their opinions, we ask this, but then we forget to use the information.
Oh, 100%. 100%. We have, I really do, because of COVID and a pandemic, we as adults have the executive functioning skills to somewhat navigate what this looks like. I sometimes think, for me, I forget that these students don't have necessarily those skills needed to do this. So I immediately started checking in with them. How are you feeling? How are you doing? What's going on in your world? But then I was using exit slips, and again, hundreds of paper. I counted one day I had 172 kids in my class. Like, that's just too much paper. So I went to my my tech coach, Sean Forty, and I said, I want to do this, but I don't know how to make it more efficient. And he said, okay, so we're going to make a QR code. We're going to make a Google form that connects to it. And then the kids can just type it in there, and then there's no paper. And because of that, I can filter, I can organize, I can sort them based on names so I can see trends. Oh, little Bobby he's had a really hard couple of days. He's really frustrated with rhythm. He's really frustrated with pitch. And then I can see over the course of 4 months, how is he doing? Mm-hmm. And so using that information has been really helpful. And like you said earlier, building those student relations.
Yeah. The technology is wonderful for that kind of stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I know you just mentioned I guess it's obvious and yet it's not. Like, what was the difference between when you were starting and because you saw from another classroom how, you know, the magic of the classroom, like what changes have you seen in your own music students from now implementing this and making this part of the classroom routines? What are the kids, you know, what's the difference in the kids?
Well, the kids have definitely started to connect that it's their classroom rather than my classroom. It's their learning environment. When they see me ask the question, how do you want to learn this? And then we follow through with it. They really were like, oh, he is actually listening. He really wants us to their ideas. And because, again, building those relationships, it really did help with having those difficult questions of what can we do? How can we help you? What do I need to help you with? You know, I've had some students, because of music, feel very comfortable with having very difficult conversations that were not about music, about home life, about recess, about different aspects of their life that had nothing to do with music. But because I've spent several years building relationships, listening, it was really great for them to finally be able to connect. And then we were able to get the help that they needed. So again, students feeling successful, feeling safe, feeling able to use these centers effectively. Again, when I first started, students were very hesitant, 100%. They were very hesitant. They had no idea, like, what do you mean we're not just supposed to listen to you for 45 minutes? And so it was tough. It was very tough, but gradually we chipped away with those fears of, again, I'm not expecting you to be perfect. I expect you to try. And what that looks like is up to you. And it took a while, but I'm reaping in the benefits of it finally. And it just looks really amazing.
Yeah. I have to say, when you see a kid who doesn't see themselves as a creative musical person, and then they get that light bulb moment, or they have that moment where there's a flip of like, wait, I think I can. It's like, it really is one of the most rewarding things as a teacher. Absolutely. To see them, right? Like, to help them see themselves as a creative musical person. It's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a friend who has put a long full-length mirror in front of her door, and with the thing, I am ... And I just love it. And I was like, how could I tie this with music? Because how we talk to ourselves is so apparent in what we believe we're able. And, you know, again, I'm not here for our students to be Mozart or Beethoven. If that's what they want, let's make it happen. But I want my students just to be like, I'm a musician in my way. And my way looks different than your way, and that's okay.
Yeah. And I want them to not only feel like they're a musician when they're in my classroom, but when they're outside of it as well. And it sounds like the way that you're connecting music to their lives, you're doing that.
Yes. Well, we're trying. We're definitely trying. You know, I have a lot of students who love GarageBand, as I'm sure there's a lot of people out there. And, you know, we have all seen, again, what we talked about, YouTube and DJs out there being absolutely successful. Like, who knows, we might be able to create like an experience for them to really see that, like, DJ or mixing or studio producing or sound producer is something they really want to be interested. And I'm going to miss that opportunity if those engagements aren't even available to them.
It's so powerful. So if someone listening is as excited as we are right now and they wanted to dive in and try it, what advice would you give a teacher who wants to start off with some kind of centers in this way?
I will say the same advice that Yasmin told me. Start with just a couple. Start with 2. And if that means that you're at one and they're reading a book about music on the other one, that's fine. Just start. Just try it. It's one lesson. It doesn't even have to be a whole lesson. It can be 10 minutes and then you bring them all back in. But just try it. You know, my biggest fear led me to not try for so long. And I wish I would have even started earlier, because it would have just helped those kids even more. So I always say, you know, just try it. Try 1, try 2, reflect, change, you know, we all learners in our own right. We all on our own personal inquiries, we're all wondering about ourselves, but making sure that we're also challenging how we do things. One of the best things I've ever seen was a teacher who has taught 30 years, tried a new way. And she was like, I wish I would have done this before.
Yeah.
And she's like, but I didn't because I was scared, because this is how I've always done it. And I was like, I feel you. I understand. I don't have 30 years, but I understand that feeling of, well, I only have this amount of time and I don't want to fail them.
Yeah.
But in reality, we very rarely fail them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and when you try just one little thing, that's okay. And it's also, I think it's okay for the students to know that we're taking a risk and trying something new.
Absolutely. And bringing them into the learning that you're learning. And how much better of a way to lead by example of inquiry education than to show it in the classroom.
Right.
I am trying a different way of teaching. This is my line of inquiry. This is my big question. Let's see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm always a big fan of sharing our learning with students, because I think it's very powerful to show lifelong learning doesn't end in grade 12.
Right.
Yep. And I love to show them. Yeah, right. And I love to show my mistake, admit my mistakes too, when I make mistakes. Like, see, it's just feedback. It just helps me know for next time I'm learning, right? I'm not a robot. And they have to, I think it's helpful for them to hear that from their teachers. Like, if she's making mistakes, it must be okay if I make mistakes. And
100%. When I always had a colleague, Harmony, she's an art teacher, and she said, turn your mistake into a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And I have used that with thousands of kids because I just think it's really powerful. Yeah. It really is just a way of growing, that we're not here to be perfect. We're all learning, and we should all be trying, and we can all grow no matter how successful we are. The best violinist in the world is still learning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think our grade 1 students is going to be okay. Like, they can learn too. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just part of the process. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how could people get in contact with you, or how do they reach out to you, learn more about you? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a huge fan of Twitter. Again, Twitter has been my professional learning network for going on a decade now. It has been how I try new things, reflect, share with colleagues, get feedback to feed forward. Twitter is massive. I am also a big fan of LinkedIn. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I am just now starting a podcast called Recess Duty, where we bring in other educators to share their stories and make a fun little place for collaboration. It hopefully will be out in the beginning of November. So hopefully it'll be a lot of fun. And yeah, those are the two main places I really I try to keep professional learning happening.
Awesome. We'll make sure to put links to all of that in the show notes, so people can reach out and learn and continue to see your process and all of that.
Oh, and I guess we should probably mention that where they can find the blog that we are talking about.
Yes,
go for it.
I didn't even think about that. Yes, that was at leviallison.com. Empowering student ownership through choice. It is definitely one of the most read blog posts I wrote, and is definitely one of the ones I'm more proud of. I will say that, because it's just something I'm very proud of trying and being somewhat quasi successful with, but we are continuing to reflect and learning. Now with all our centers this year, I'm trying to add a QR code to each center so they can add reflections based on each center. So that is something that I'm trying a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, we'll make sure to link to the blog and then that specific post as well.
Yeah.
So relevant. It's perfect.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. This was really
absolutely.
It was exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you. When you both asked if I would be able to come on, I was like, yes. A huge fan of Pass the Baton, a big fan of sharing that music does not have to be just 45 minutes of continued talking, and getting in students involved is also a way and a possibility for us as well. So thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure and so much fun.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
It was nice meeting you all.
Thanks for joining us. Make sure you subscribe below.
And follow us on social media. I'm at Musical Theresa.
I'm Singing Finch 1.
And you can follow the hashtag Pass the Baton Book.